The mysterious signal. The vastness of space was punctuated by the cold, metallic presence of the Earth fleet, an armada that had not seen combat in generations. Among the silent giants, the ESS Sentinel held a unique position. It was a vessel of exploration, a ship meant to scout the unknown corners of the galaxy. But today, its mission was more profound. A signal had been detected, something ancient and powerful, emanating from a distant, forgotten sector. The crew, led by Captain Alara Hayes, was tasked with uncovering its origin. As the ship drew closer to the source, the tension aboard was palpable. The signal was unlike anything they had encountered before, pulsing with an eerie rhythm that seemed almost alive. Ilara, a seasoned explorer, had seen her fair share of strange phenomena, but this was different. It was as if the signal was calling out to them, beckoning them closer. "Commander Arlen, status report." Ilara's voice was steady, betraying none of the unease she felt. "Captain, we've isolated the source. It's coming from an ancient structure on the surface of an uncharted planet. The architecture doesn't match any known species," Arlen replied, his brow furrowed in concentration. Ilara nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "Prepare a landing team. I want to see this for myself." As the Sentinel descended through the atmosphere, the landscape below came into view. It was a barren world, its surface scarred by centuries of abandonment. The structure that housed the signal was enormous, a monolithic building that defied the ravages of time. Its dark, angular lines were both alien and familiar, hinting at a civilization long lost to history. The landing party, composed of Ilara, Arlen, and a small group of elite soldiers, made their way towards the entrance. The air was thick with the weight of the unknown. Each step echoed in the stillness, amplifying their sense of isolation. "Captain, the signal is stronger here," one of the soldiers reported, his voice barely a whisper. "It's almost as if the structure itself is alive." Ilara felt it too, a subtle vibration that thrummed beneath her feet. They pushed forward, the ancient doors groaning as they slid open. Inside, the darkness was absolute, broken only by the faint glow of their lights. The walls were lined with intricate carvings, telling a story that none of them could decipher. At the heart of the structure, they found it. A massive console, dormant for millennia, now thrumming with the energy of the signal. Ilara approached cautiously, her fingers brushing over the controls. Suddenly, the room was flooded with light, and the console sprang to life. "Captain, we're picking up something on the scanners," Arlen said, his voice tinged with urgency. "There's a ship, a fleet, heading our way." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. "Earth fleet? No, Captain. It's something else." Before she could respond, the console emitted a burst of energy, and the ancient carvings on the walls began to shift, forming new shapes and symbols. Ilara's eyes widened as the realization hit her. "This isn't just a signal," she whispered. "It's a beacon. The awakening." The beacon's activation had unleashed a chain reaction that resonated far beyond the abandoned planet. Across the galaxy, dormant systems hummed to life, their ancient protocols triggered by the signal's reawakening. For the first time in over 500,000 years, the galaxy was about to remember the force that had once ruled the stars. Humanity. As the Sentinel's crew struggled to comprehend the implications, their sensors went haywire. The incoming fleet, still hours away, was broadcasting on a frequency that none of them recognized. But there was no mistaking the power behind it. These ships were massive, their silhouettes dark against the void, bristling with weapons that had been lost to time. "Captain, we need to leave." "Now," Arlen urged, his eyes wide with fear. Ilara, however, was transfixed by the beacon. There was something here, something vital that she couldn't leave behind. "We can't go yet. We need to understand what this is." As she spoke, the console flared again, projecting a holographic map of the galaxy. At its center was Earth, surrounded by a network of ancient routes and waypoints that had been forgotten by all but the oldest civilizations. The map pulsed with energy, and Ilara realized that it was charting a course. "Captain, the fleet. It's not just coming for us," one of the soldiers said, his voice trembling. "It's heading for Earth." The weight of the revelation hit her like a physical blow. This was no ordinary signal. It was a call to arms, a rallying cry from a time when humanity had been the undisputed rulers of the galaxy. And now that past was coming back with a vengeance. "We need to warn Earth," Ilara said, her voice firm. "Whatever is coming, they're not prepared for it." The Sentinel's engines roared to life as they ascended from the planet's surface. The ancient structure, now fully awake, pulsed with an ominous light. Ilara watched as the beacon's signal spread across the galaxy, reaching out to distant corners where humanity's influence had long since faded. But even as they raced back to their ship, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. The fleet bearing down on them was ancient, its technology far beyond anything they had encountered, and it was coming home. As they broke through the planet's atmosphere, the full scale of the situation became clear. The fleet was enormous, a vast armada that stretched across the horizon. Each ship was a testament to humanity's once great empire, their hulls scarred by centuries of battle. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the truth. The fleet wasn't just returning to Earth. It was coming to reclaim it. The first contact, the Sentinel was pushed to its limits as it fled the planet, its engines straining against the immense gravitational pull of the ancient fleet. Ilara's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of history that had led to this moment. Who had built the fleet? And why had it been abandoned for so long? As the ship streaked through space, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The fleet, though still hours away, seemed to be tracking their every move, its presence looming like a dark cloud on the edge of her consciousness. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," Arlen reported, his voice tense. "It's coming from the fleet." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. "Put it through." The bridge filled with the sound of static, followed by a deep, resonant voice that sent chills down her spine. "This is Admiral Voss of the Seven Thief Expeditionary Fleet. Identify yourselves." Ilara hesitated for a moment before responding. "This is Captain Ilara Hayes of the Earthship Sentinel. We're on a mission of exploration." "Who are you?" There was a long pause before the voice replied. "Captain Hayes, you are trespassing in a restricted sector. Stand down and prepare to be boarded." Ilara's mind raced. There was no way they could stand against the might of the fleet. But she also knew that surrender was not an option. Whatever secrets the fleet held, they were too dangerous to fall into the wrong hands. "We can't let them board us," she said, turning to Arlen. "We need to buy some time." Arlen nodded, his fingers flying over the controls. "I'll activate the stealth systems. It won't hold for long, but it might give us a chance to escape." As the Sentinel disappeared from the fleet's sensors, Ilara took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions raging within her. They were on the brink of a discovery that could change the course of history, but they were also facing an enemy that was far beyond their understanding. "Captain, we have a problem," Arlen said, his voice tight with tension. "The fleet is deploying drones. They're searching for us." Ilara's mind raced as she tried to come up with a plan. "We need to find a way to disable their systems. If we can take out their communication network, we might be able to slip away." The ship shuddered as the drones closed in, their sensors sweeping through space like a net. Ilara could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of their situation threatening to crush her. "Captain, I have an idea," Arlen said, his voice tinged with desperation. "If we can tap into the beacon's signal, we might be able to overload their systems. It's a long shot, but it's all we've got." Ilara nodded, her mind made up. "Do it, and make it quick." As Arlen worked to reroute the beacon's signal, the tension on the bridge was palpable. Every second felt like an eternity, the drones drawing closer with each passing moment. Finally, the console beeped, signaling that the connection had been established. "It's done," Arlen said, his voice shaking with adrenaline. "But we need to get out of here now." The Sentinel's engines roared to life as they blasted away from the fleet. For a moment, it seemed as if they might actually escape. But then, the console flared with warning lights. "Captain, the fleet, they've locked onto us," Arlen said, his voice filled with despair. Ilara's heart sank as she realized the truth. They were out of time. The fleet was too powerful, its technology too advanced. They had no hope of escape. But even as the Sentinel was engulfed in the fleet's gravitational pull, Alara couldn't help but feel a strange sense of resolve. They had uncovered something incredible, something that could change everything. And no matter what happened next, she knew that they had to find a way to warn Earth. Because if the fleet was coming, humanity was in grave danger. The betrayal as the Sentinel was pulled towards the heart of the fleet. Ilara's mind raced with thoughts of survival. The fleet's power was undeniable, and their technology was beyond anything she had ever seen. But she knew that giving up was not an option. "Captain, we're being hailed again," Arlen said, his voice heavy with tension. "It's Admiral Voss." Ilara took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "Put him through." The bridge filled with the Admiral's deep, resonant voice. "Captain Hayes, you've made a grave mistake. Your actions have compromised the integrity of our mission. You will be held accountable." Ilara felt a surge of anger. "Your mission? What exactly is your mission, Admiral? And why have you been hiding out here for 500,000 years?" There was a long pause before Voss responded, his voice cold and measured. "Our mission is to protect humanity. We were tasked with safeguarding the galaxy from threats that you cannot even begin to comprehend. And you have just awakened one of those threats." Ilara's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to process the Admiral's words. "What are you talking about?" "We found the beacon, yes, but all it did was send out a signal." "How is that a threat?" "The signal was not meant for you," Voss replied, his tone icy. "It was a call to arms, a message to the rest of the fleet. And now that it's been activated, there's no turning back." Ilara's mind reeled. She had thought the fleet was coming to reclaim Earth, but now it seemed that their mission was far more sinister. "What do you mean? What threat have we awakened?" Voss's voice was filled with a cold fury. The beacon was a fail-safe, a last resort to summon the fleet in case of a catastrophic event. But its activation also triggered a response from our enemies, the ones we were meant to protect you from. They are on their way, and they will stop at nothing to destroy us all. Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. The fleet wasn't just returning to Earth, it was preparing for a war that could wipe out all of humanity. "Captain, we need to do something," Arlen said, his voice shaking with fear. "If what the Admiral is saying is true, we don't have much time." Ilara nodded, her mind racing. "We need to warn Earth. They have to know what's coming." But as she turned to give the order, the console flared with warning lights. "Captain, we're being boarded!" one of the soldiers shouted, his voice filled with panic. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest as the reality of their situation set in. They were trapped, surrounded by an enemy that was far more powerful than they could have ever imagined. "Hold your ground," she ordered, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "We can't let them take us without a fight." But even as she spoke, the doors to the bridge burst open, and a squad of heavily armed soldiers stormed in. At their head was Admiral Voss, his face twisted into a sneer of triumph. "You should have surrendered when you had the chance, Captain," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Now, it's too late." Ilara's mind raced as she tried to think of a way out, but it was too late. The Admiral's soldiers moved with ruthless efficiency, quickly overpowering her crew. As she was forced to her knees, Ilara couldn't help but feel a sense of despair. They had uncovered the truth, but it had come at a terrible cost. The fleet was preparing for a war, and humanity was caught in the middle. But even as the Admiral's soldiers dragged her away, Ilara knew that she couldn't give up. There was still a chance, however slim, to warn Earth, and she was determined to take it, because if the fleet was coming, humanity needed to be ready. The Alliance, the hold of the Earth fleet ship, was dark and cold, the air thick with the scent of ozone and fear. Ilara sat against the wall, her wrists bound in thick, unyielding metal cuffs. The cold bit into her skin, but she barely noticed it. Her mind was elsewhere, racing through the possibilities, searching for any glimmer of hope. Voss had made a mistake, though he didn't know it yet. By taking her alive, he had given her time. Time to think, time to plan. She knew the odds were against her, that escape was nearly impossible, but she had to try. For Earth, for humanity, she had to try. The door to her cell hissed open, and 2 guards stepped in, their faces hidden behind dark visors. They were silent as they hauled her to her feet, dragging her down the narrow corridor towards the interrogation chamber. She could feel the cold steel of the floor through her boots, the oppressive weight of the ship pressing down on her. When they reached the chamber, they forced her into a chair, locking her wrists and ankles to the metal restraints. She looked around, taking in the stark, featureless walls, the harsh light glaring down from above. It was designed to break people, to wear them down until they had nothing left. The door slid open again, and Voss entered, his face as unreadable as ever. He took a seat across from her, folding his hands on the table between them. "Captain Hayes," he said, his voice cold and clinical. "I want to make something very clear to you. You are in no position to bargain. You are here because I chose to keep you alive. If you cooperate, you might just survive this." Alara met his gaze, refusing to back down. "You may have captured me, Admiral, but that doesn't mean I'm going to just roll over and give you what you want." Voss's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something almost like respect. "You're brave, I'll give you that, but bravery won't save you. You're outmatched, outnumbered, and completely at my mercy." Alara leaned forward as much as her restraints would allow. "You don't scare me, Voss. You think you can just waltz in and take over Earth? You'll have to get through me first." For a moment, Voss was silent, his eyes searching her face. Then, to her surprise, he leaned back and nodded. "You're right, Captain. I can't take Earth without a fight, but that's not what I want." Alara frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Voss sighed, rubbing his temples as if he was tired of the conversation already. "What I want, Captain, is to save humanity. The threat we face is far greater than you can imagine. Earth is vulnerable, and the only way we can protect it is by working together." She stared at him, trying to process his words. "You expect me to believe that, after everything you've done?" Voss leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Believe what you want, Captain, but the fact remains that we are on the brink of annihilation. The enemies we face are not of this galaxy. They are ancient, powerful, and relentless. If we don't unite, we will all be destroyed." Alara felt a chill run down her spine. Voss was a dangerous man, but she could see the truth in his eyes. He wasn't lying. The threat he spoke of was real, and it was coming for them all. "What do you need from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Voss nodded, as if he had been waiting for her to ask that question. "I need your help, Captain. Your knowledge of Earth, your skills, your insight. Together we can prepare for what's coming, but we need to act quickly." Alara hesitated, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. Could she really trust him? Could she really work with the man who had just tried to destroy her? But then she thought of Earth, of the billions of lives that depended on her. She couldn't afford to let her pride get in the way. If Voss was telling the truth, then they had no other choice. "All right," she said finally. "I'll help you, but on one condition." Voss raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" "You have to promise me that you'll do everything in your power to protect Earth. No more lies, no more secrets. We work together, or not at all." For a moment, Voss was silent, his eyes locked on hers. Then slowly he nodded. "Agreed. The final battle. The alliance between Earth and the fleet was uneasy at best, but both sides knew that they had no other choice. The enemy was approaching fast, and there was no time for mistrust or petty disagreements. They had to work together, or they would all perish." Alara stood on the bridge of the Sentinel, now fully integrated into the fleet. The crew around her was a mix of humans and soldiers from the ancient fleet, all working together to prepare for the battle to come. The air was thick with tension, but there was also a sense of determination. They were ready to fight, ready to defend their home. "Captain Hayes," Arlen's voice came over the comms, pulling her out of her thoughts. "We've received word from Earth. They're mobilizing all available forces to assist us." Alara nodded, a spark of hope igniting in her chest. "Good. We'll need all the help we can get." As she watched the fleet prepare for battle, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Despite the odds, they had come together, united in their determination to protect humanity. It was a far cry from the mistrust and suspicion that had plagued them just days before. "Captain, incoming transmission from Admiral Voss," one of the communications officers reported. "Put him through," Ilara ordered. Voss's image appeared on the screen, his expression grim. "Captain, our sensors have detected the enemy fleet. They're moving faster than we anticipated. We have less than an hour before they reach us." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. "Understood. What's the plan?" Voss's gaze hardened. "We'll form a defensive perimeter around Earth. The goal is to hold them off long enough for our reinforcements to arrive. We can't let them break through." Ilara nodded, her resolve firm. "We'll do whatever it takes." As the Sentinel moved into position, Ilara felt the weight of her responsibility settle on her shoulders. This was it. The final battle. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders, and there was no room for error. "Captain, the enemy fleet is within range," Arlen reported, his voice tense. Ilara took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "All hands, prepare for battle." The space around them erupted in a frenzy of activity as the enemy fleet closed in. Ships from both sides exchanged fire, the void lighting up with the bright flashes of explosions and energy blasts. The Sentinel shuddered as it took a direct hit, but Ilara held her ground, directing her crew with calm efficiency. "Focus fire on the lead ships," she ordered. "We need to break their formation." The battle raged on, each side pushing the other to its limits. But despite their best efforts, the enemy fleet was relentless, their ships tearing through the Alliance's defenses with terrifying precision. "Captain, our shields are failing," one of the officers shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Ilara's mind raced as she searched for a solution. They couldn't hold out much longer, but they couldn't afford to retreat either. If the enemy broke through, it would be the end. Then suddenly, a new signal appeared on their scanners. Reinforcements. Earth had arrived. The tide of battle shifted as the new fleet joined the fray, their combined firepower overwhelming the enemy. For the first time, Ilara felt a glimmer of hope. They might just survive this after all. But the enemy was not ready to give up. As the battle raged on, their ships began to regroup, forming a tight, impenetrable formation. Ilara watched in horror as they unleashed a devastating barrage of firepower, their weapons tearing through the Allied fleet with deadly precision. "We're losing ground," Arlen reported, his voice filled with despair. "We can't hold them off." Ilara's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the truth. They were out of time. The enemy was too powerful, their technology too advanced. There was no way they could win this battle. But even as the enemy fleet closed in, Ilara refused to give up. There had to be a way, some way to turn the tide in their favor. And then it hit her. "Arlen, can we use the beacon?" she asked, her voice filled with urgency. Arlen frowned, confused. "The beacon? But that's what brought them here in the first place." "Exactly," Ilara replied, her mind racing. "If we can reverse the signal, we might be able to disrupt their systems, throw them off balance." Arlen's eyes widened as he realized what she was suggesting. "It's a long shot, but it might just work." Ilara nodded, her resolve firm. "Do it. We have nothing to lose." As Arlen worked to reverse the signal, Ilara turned her attention back to the battle. The enemy fleet was closing in fast, their ships moving with deadly precision. But she knew that if they could just buy a little more time, they might be able to turn the tide. Finally, the console beeped, signaling that the signal had been reversed. "It's done," Arlen said, his voice shaking with adrenaline. Ilara held her breath as she watched the enemy fleet. For a moment, nothing happened. But then, slowly, their formation began to break apart, their ships scattering as their systems went haywire. "They're retreating!" one of the officers shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. Ilara felt a surge of relief as she watched the enemy fleet retreat, their ships disappearing into the void. They had done it. They had won. But even as the cheers erupted around her, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The enemy had been defeated, but the threat was far from over. There would be more battles to come, more sacrifices to be made. But for now, they had won a crucial victory, and that was enough. The aftermath. The battlefield was a graveyard of ships, the wreckage of both fleets scattered across the void. The once pristine Earth fleet was now a shadow of its former self, its ships battered and broken. But they had survived, and that was all that mattered. Ilara stood on the bridge of the Sentinel, watching as the remaining ships limped back to Earth. The cost of the battle had been high, but they had achieved the impossible. They had held the line. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Earth," Arlen reported, his voice filled with exhaustion. "Put it through," Ilara ordered. The screen flickered to life, revealing the face of a high-ranking Earth official. "Captain Hayes, on behalf of the Earth government, I want to thank you and your crew for your bravery. You've done us all a great service." Ilara nodded, too tired to muster much of a response. "We did what we had to do." The official's expression softened. "I understand that this has been a difficult time for all of us, but thanks to your efforts, we have a chance to rebuild. We won't forget what you've done here." Ilara nodded again, her mind already drifting to the next challenge. The battle might be over, but the war was far from won. They had bought themselves some time, but she knew that the enemy would be back. And next time, they might not be so lucky. As the transmission ended, Ilara turned to her crew, her expression somber. "We did good today, but we can't afford to let our guard down. There's still a long road ahead." The crew nodded, their faces grim. They all knew what was at stake. They had survived one battle, but the war for humanity's future was just beginning. Ilara sighed, her shoulders heavy with the weight of leadership. She had been thrust into this role by necessity, but she knew that she had to see it through. For Earth, for humanity, she had to keep fighting. "Let's get this ship back to Earth," she ordered, her voice steady. "We have a lot of work to do." As the Sentinel set course for home, Ilara allowed herself a moment of reflection. The battle had been brutal, the losses devastating. But they had held the line. They had protected Earth, and that was something to be proud of. But even as she looked out at the stars, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The enemy had been defeated, but they were still out there, waiting, watching, and she knew that they would stop at nothing to achieve their goals. The fight was far from over, but Ilara was ready. She had faced the enemy and lived to tell the tale, and she knew that whatever came next, she would be ready to face it head-on, because humanity was worth fighting for, and she would do whatever it took to protect it.